working on fully accepting myself, both me feeling maybe not white enough for the spaces I'm in that are predominantly white, and
Mm.
also feeling not African enough in like spaces where it's like family functions and things like that, because I'm
Yeah.
always feeling like I'm in the middle, and I don't
Yeah.
think that's something that ever will go away completely. And so one thing I've been working on recently is just radically self-accepting both sides and being like, hey, like I'm not perfect. Like I'm not gonna fully understand the cultures of either side. Like I don't ski that much. I honestly don't hike that much, but I also don't understand every word in the Ethiopian language. Like I will be confused in conversations and
Yeah.
like being okay with that, and it's like no one's perfect, and um just like being like, hey, y'all don't mess with me, that's cool, like I am who I am, like
Yeah.
both sides put together, and that's just what it is.
What are the things you've done to like accept that truth more, right? Because I think that's the reason why I started this podcast for like people like us, where you're kind of in between worlds a bit. Like you have African immigrant parents, but you grew up in the US, and like you kind of find yourself between worlds a bit, where you kind of relate to both the American and the African side, but you're not 100% of either, and you find yourself in this kind of weird space of like, where exactly do I do I fit in? So how have you I guess what are some of the steps you've tried to take to like radically accept yourself as you are, being someone who kind of sits between both worlds?
Sure. Like for the example of not understanding every word, I sometimes sit with my cousins sometimes when they like talk about some super niche like cultural thing that happened in Ethiopia or some meme, and I don't know what they're talking about, and I'm just like, "Oh, what's that?" And just like being open about not knowing instead of silently sitting there and
Yeah.
kind of like not suffering, but just like feeling like, this is weird. Like I can't relate to y'all. Like I don't know, I'm just gonna zone out right now. Just like being actively trying to always learn and just being
Mm.
okay with not knowing anything, usually like feeling like you don't know anything. Um, because it's like it's growth, and it's just part of having fun with it too, and just
Yeah.
being like, hey, like I'm learning something new. This is great. Like now next time I'll know how to talk about this thing, and just things like that, like being super open and not feeling too worried about what people think when it comes to not knowing something.
Did it take you a while to get to that point though, like not maybe feeling embarrassed about having to ask those extra questions, or do you think maybe that's come more natural?
I would say it's still hard.
Yeah,
I feel
I feel
embarrassed
you.
sometimes, definitely. And I think that's just part of working on it is being cool with it. Because yeah, it can be kind of embarrassing when my cousins clown on me when they're like, oh, you don't know what this is? Like, but it's just like, yeah, I don't know, and tell me. And I'm from here, like, and
Yeah.
what? Just being like, whatever. It is what it is. Yeah, this is part of it. I don't think I've ever really struggled with um connecting with African Americans. I feel like I am. I identify as one, so
Mhm.
it doesn't really, I don't think that's something I necessarily struggle with, but at the same time, I do see that some of my character can sometimes feel a little too African. Um, like just in terms of feeling, I don't know how to describe it, honestly, but I think maybe it goes back to how that super humble like feeling of just like being super quiet, super not as open and
Mm.
more closed in. I think that can sometimes be an African trait, and I don't know, but at least it is for me.
Yeah.
And I think that can kind of make me feel a little different. But yeah, I think that would be my struggle, I think. Um, But I remember I think it was in middle school, I wrote a poem about feeling too African and not feeling enough of like, not feeling like I was Black American. And
Mm.
I honestly, I don't even remember what I wrote, but I remember I was just like so passionate about it because I think at the time this was in California, so
Mm.
I was around a lot of people who looked like me. And I think being surrounded by that, I was more hyper aware of the fact that I had like more of an African side than just
Yeah.
African American. And so, yeah, I notice it, but it's also beautiful because, we're all like an amalgamation of things and we all just share different cultures and learn from each other. Yeah, so I think it's great.
So speaking of like maybe feeling too African, right? In kind of an environment like that, as you've kind of transitioned to Portland, which as we both know is very white, I guess it is what is that like? Is it more so because to me sometimes in like white environment, because I've been in white environments my whole life, it's never in white environments, it's almost like I'm conscious of maybe being too black as opposed to like being too African. And so has that ever like when you're like in medical school, right? Like where you're around mostly white people, is that something you're conscious of? Maybe like the too African part, or is it more just like being kind of black in general and maybe not wanting to be perceived a certain way? If that, I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, yeah, you're making sense. I think in medical school, being maybe like one of five Black girls or people in our class, it was definitely more of feeling Black in general, not necessarily feeling too African, but just feeling Black. It's so it's that thing of always being mistaken for another Black girl
Yeah,
is just like super common. Like it's just like an everyday, every other day thing. Things like just being recognized quickly can just make you hyper aware of the fact that you're one of few.
yeah,
And yeah, I think it's just looking how I look in the spaces I am in itself is a little, I think, disturbing to the space and to the people in the space. Just like naturally, it's just not as common. And yeah, part of it is just embracing it and finding humor in it. And I'm glad I have, I'm not the only one, so I can have people to look at when things are a little weird and have that like side eye
yeah,
conversation and
yeah,
silence and
for sure.
just being able to debrief and things like that. I think is really important.
Back to your upbringing a little bit. I guess what were the maybe the cultural expectations that you face, whether they were explicitly said to you by your parents or maybe just unsaid, just kind of expected, right? Like just indicated um to you, like just being in an Ethiopian household. Um and I guess maybe how have you dealt with that as you've gotten older, or has that even required any dealing with from like just from your perspective?
Yeah. So as an Ethiopian growing up, I guess this is like African culture in general. It's like choosing a career, being a doctor, a lawyer, or like an engineer. It's I've been lucky where I feel like my parents haven't necessarily been like, you need to be one of those. And I feel lucky that I kind of chose this profession on my own, but at the same time, in the back of my mind, I'm always trying to make sure that I didn't decide to be a doctor for my parents. As much as I want to make them proud, I
Yeah,
think it's important to always take into consideration, like at the end of the day, you're alone with yourself and all the sacrifices you've made, all the hard work you've put into something only you will look back and see like say, "Hey, I am proud of this," or "Oh man, I wasted my time trying to please other people." And it's like it's always in the back of my mind and just making sure that I'm doing things not only for my family, which I always have that in mind, but also that I am proud of what I'm doing for myself and that it's truly what I want to do and what my purpose is. So I think the biggest thing for me growing up was trying to find my purpose outside of my identity as an only child, the first and only daughter of
Mm,
an immigrant family, and trying to remove myself from that while also recognizing it so that I
yeah.
don't have regrets in the future about how I spent my life. Yeah.
What is that process of making sure that you are doing it for yourself? Is it journaling? Is it meditation? Like how do you go about deciphering that?
Honestly, it's a lot of prayer. I feel like and journaling. I guess I don't really journal, but I kind of just think to myself. Maybe it's meditation. Um, just really reflecting, taking time sometimes to sit back and be like, am I really doing this for myself or not? Especially when it gets hard. I think that's really when, when you start thinking like, man, is this worth it? Like, is this worth doing the work for? Like I know for me, when it comes to different research projects, because I do a lot of research in medical school, so like with that comes along working with many different types of people. And sometimes that can be pretty difficult. I don't um, necessarily feel like everyone is super easy all the time to work with. And
Yeah.
so sometimes, just thinking about like, I guess, I don't know, I guess I'm just like, I like to reflect and think, hey, is this something that I really want to invest my time into for like a project or for something that some physician wants me to help them with? And because, there's only so much time you have in a day, and as much as you want to like do as much as you can to, do whatever you're passionate about, I think it's like important to reflect sometimes and just be like, okay, do I actually want to do this? Um, is this worth my time? But again, that's not really easy to do all the time. Like, especially when you're busy all the time, when you have things to do, it's easy to get lost in like everyday work, and like the everyday flow of things. So it's something I'm still working on.
When you go through that, when you do have time to go through that process, right? Whether the reflection or the prayer, what is that answer that you keep like what is the inspiration behind like wanting to be a doctor? Like what is that purpose you keep finding yourself coming back to that reaffirms that you're on the right track?
So it was actually an experience I had in Ethiopia about a few months before I started medical school. I had the chance to go to Ethiopia for 2 months. It was the longest time I've ever been there.
Mm,
And I had the chance to shadow and volunteer slash work at an eye clinic. And I've never really done that there. I've always just like been with family the few times that I visited before. So this was the first time I was like in the workspace, like a healthcare workspace in Ethiopia, and just seeing it for what it was. And I think that really changed some things for me. I saw patients that had cataracts that were like so intense, like the type that you don't see here because there's less care there, and so sometimes it gets so bad. And just watching them after they have their surgery, which is pretty quick, and then they have like 1 or 2 days, or a few days, and then they get to take off their like bandages on their eye, and they can like see for the first time, going from seeing like almost legally blind to 20/20, and just seeing their reaction is just like it's so rewarding to be able to just witness some experience like that from someone else, having a patient like jump into the arms of a doctor and just like so happy and overwhelmed. Mind you, these patients are coming from different parts of the country or different parts of Africa. So they don't even necessarily speak Amharic or any Ethiopian language, but
mm.
like it like surpasses any language barriers because you can see the joy in their face. And I think like going back to that moment really makes me remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want to be able to do ophthalmology in the future and be able to go back to Ethiopia and be able to do things like this and have that reaction hopefully in the future and just be able to make a difference for my people there. So yeah, I think that's what I come back to a lot.
Growing up, I mean, it was like, like I think many second generation kids, it's like your parents are very much like, hey, like you need to be like hitting the books, you need to make sure your education is straight, like extracurriculars are great, but like we like you need to go ahead and do this to like you can become like this like doctor or lawyer or whatever, like all like the kind of the stereotypes that are out there. Like I'm sure it's not like across the board, but I know that's how my parents were. Like they wanted me to be a doctor, and I was terrible at science. So I'm like, I don't think this is gonna work out, guys. I don't think this is gonna be what happens here for me. But yeah, like I think growing up, like I'm very very grounded in my roots, being Nigerian and Ugandan. I know that was one thing that my parents always wanted to make sure that myself and my older brother were always connected to, was that hey, like yeah, like you're in America, it's land of opportunity, and you have all these great avenues that you can go down, but also know where we came from and know like where your roots are and like what your background is and be proud of it as well, which is a big thing I think for us like second generation kids here in America. Is like hey, like there's gonna be all these sort of different directions that you can be pulled into, and like just the way people might perceive you and all that, but they wanted to make sure that we were always proud of where we were from and proud of who we were. And that's kind of how I grew up, and I think that's what's helped make me be the man that I am today.
It sounds like your self-esteem, maybe that confidence in yourself was always high, but I'm wondering, just grappling with identity, was that something that you felt like you had to deal with a little bit? Because you mentioned Everett, and I'm from Bellevue and Issaquah, and again, for those of you listening, those are kind of two other suburbs of Seattle. Again, like Everett, predominantly white and probably predominantly Asian also. But for me, it was really interesting because at home it was. I mean, my family's from Ghana, so it was very Ghanaian at home, and then at school, it's not only the fact that it's so like white or Asian and that there are so many people who don't look like me, but it's the fact that of the few black kids who were around, it's like I didn't totally relate to them either, because it's like it's almost like you're too American to be African, and you're too African to be like Black American, and so I felt like a lot of times I felt almost pigeonholed with just being one of the few black kids that you're just kind of like what we perceive black in America to be, even though there are kind of a lot more nuances and complexities to that. And so I what I'm trying to say is like I never really felt like I fit in, so to speak, and kind of that sense of identity was something I always struggled with a little bit. So even as you describe that intention and just the actions that your parents had, and this self-esteem that always seemed to be high for you, was that something you even consciously thought about, maybe even being different from your other kind of black peers?
I definitely noticed it for sure, and I think I think it's a great point that you bring up because like you said, like you growing up, like it's like you're from like you're Ghanaian and like I'm Nigerian and Ugandan, and like the other kids that look like you, like they might be Black American, so it's like it's almost like, and like yeah, there was times where I'm just like, oh, like you almost feel like you have to be like almost like wearing like different hats essentially, and like I never felt that like I needed to like quote unquote like act black or anything like that. Like I'm like I don't even know what the hell that means. First of all, and also like yeah, like at times people would say like oh like you don't act like like what do you mean like I'm acting like Femi? That's how I act. Like I act like who I am. It's like I don't feel like I need to like be like shoehorned into like oh like I have to talk like this or I have to do these types of things or I have to talk like the white kids or anything like that or like the Asian kids. Like I never felt like I needed to do that. But there were times when there was like that pressure of just like wow like it's almost like I need to like kind of like not like curate my personality or do that, but like it's like assimilation. I think is a good word for it. Like you're kind of assimilating to like different groups of people in school, and like there's certain expectations of what you should be and what you are. But I think the cool thing about like just like based on like how I was raised and like just my overall like self-esteem for myself was that like even though it might not have met what their expectations were for somebody who was Black or of African descent, like they eventually just embraced me because they're like, oh, like that's who he is, that's what he's gonna be, then cool. Like Femi is Femi. Like I had a lot of friends and stuff, which was awesome. So I don't think it ever like hindered like my or like kind of like I guess a better way to phrase it is like I don't think it ever like brought me down to a space to where I'm like in my head like had like an identity crisis or anything like that. But I just felt that like I'm just gonna be who I am, and I was just like one of the things that my dad did say, like it wasn't like a saying, but he would always tell me this. He would say like never compromise who you are. You know, like just like be true to who you are because at least like you can live with it. Like if you're trying to like be somebody else or do something like that, like you're always gonna kind of regret like going for looking back on these instances. Like be who you are, don't compromise yourself, and people if they like you, they will like you for who you are. They're not gonna like you for trying to like pose as something that you're not. So I think like going about it that way, people just generally were like, okay, like this is Femi, you know, like they don't expect me to be like, oh, like I'm like sagging my pants or whatever stereotypes they might have for like young Black kids back in like the mid 2000s. Like that was just not the case for me. So yeah, like at times I felt like it, but like luckily, like eventually people just embrace you for who you are if you're that person that, like authentically, and that's who I was.
I was looking on your LinkedIn page, and there was a note there. You talked about how you didn't start going by just Amechi until college to kind of remind yourself of your Nigerian chief roots. And for those of you listening who are unfamiliar with Amechi and his story, his father is recognized as a chief in the Igbo tribe in Nigeria. And so I was curious, though, Amechi, why was it at that point in your life, being in college, to where you felt like you maybe needed that reminder of kind of where you come from, what your bloodline is?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I have one of those stories of the, really African American, right? Nigerian American, people who are in my shoes. It's a very unique position because, my mother, she's from here. She's from Oakland, California. Her family's from New Orleans, Arkansas. So, she's Black American. And my father being from Nigeria, I should say, first generation, he definitely has like one of those true American stories. Sold his motorcycle for a plane ticket to America, became an ice cream man, was doing that while going to school, ended up being an investment banker, like true American story, American dream story, I should say. And, at the time when I was in high school going into college, I just was in a period of, that's around the time when we had some cousins of ours that were murdered in Nigeria. Really just for, Nigeria is one of those places, like a lot of places around the world where, there may be a period of war that will stop for a period of time, but it kind of always comes back, whether it's like, months or years or, even decades, it's always like there, that tribal, those tribal issues. Right. And so, it was right around the time where two of my cousins had got murdered. And, it's just, I had something that told me like, you should really embrace more of your Nigerian side. I've only been to the last time I've been back to Nigeria, I was a young kid. I haven't been back actually as an adult, and I really want to go back, but it's always, issues that come up and things of that nature. So it was important for me at that time to just look, I'm gonna just go by B Mechi. A lot of people know me still as Brendan, but I want to go by Mechi. So I'm gonna just call it B Mechi. And I never looked back from that point. And Amechi means only God knows tomorrow, right? It means only God knows tomorrow. And I think that chi element of the name is something that is recognized universally, chi, spirit, energy, right? All those sort of things. It all comes to that same source of, God. And I really try to live my life by that. Only God knows tomorrow. Whether you're on a high, you could always know that tomorrow things could come down. If you're on a low, you can always know that things can come up, but you got to stay grounded. You got to stay in balance because ultimately only God knows.
So how do you stay in balance?
That's a good question. I mean, I think family is something that keeps me balanced. The people that you grew up with, if you keep solid people around you, they're always going to keep you in balance. It's funny. There's There's a big show on Apple TV called Severance. I don't know if you've heard of it. Are you familiar with that?
I have. I haven't watched it though.
Yeah, so it's an interesting concept because it's like you're splitting away your work life from your personal life without getting into the details of the show. But you basically, these people, they take this, they get the surgery where it basically splits their minds between their work life and their personal life. So you don't have to ever worry about your work life and your personal life. And in your work life, you only know your work life. You don't even know what's happening in your personal life. And, you know, the question becomes, is that something you would do? And for me, it's like a resounding hell no, because like everything is the same, you know, like I to me, the concept of having a work versus a life is like, it doesn't work for me because like everything is intermixed. Like life is all one, right? It's all intermixed. But to your question about balance, it's about having those foundations of people around you. You know, my fiance keeps me grounded. My cousins keep me grounded. You know, I've known Keys for about 10 years. So it's not like just a professional relationship that we have. That's like my brother, you know what I'm saying? So working with people on a day-to-day basis who you actually know and respect and resonate with, that's all going to keep you grounded and keep you balanced. And then you got, you know, just the extracurriculars, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's, you know, having books to read. You definitely got to stay tuned to your passions. You know, I'm a big sports fan, a big football fan, you know, whatever it may be, just catching something that's not, you know, just work focused. So I do my best to stay balanced as I can.
I knew I was obviously Nigerian. That, my parents had, very much different accents for me, and also like people I was around most of the time, and also because basically, essentially, all the schools I went to in Kansas City, were either like major, primarily Black, or also even my middle and high school were historically Black institutions in Kansas City because. To give more context, my high school, Lincoln College Preparatory Academy, opened in 1865. And so for a long time, it was basically one of the only schools that Black students could attend in the city. And so we have that really strong, I would say, culture that actually impacted me greatly because, and growing up, I really felt as a kid in Kansas City, I really just, felt just like as a Black person. And even though I knew like, my parents, were, different from, let's say, like an African-American family, for me, I was all around, my African-American or Black friends all the time. And so I didn't necessarily like see that difference. And honestly, until I went to college, and because I had the opportunity to be around students who were, directly from the African continent, I think that definitely helped. I would say was a pivotal point in me understanding more of my identity as a Nigerian American. And so I would say like, I began gradually to shift more to identifying primarily as Nigerian once I got into college, because I was able to have the opportunity to connect with that more with that side of my identity more broadly. And also because, unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to visit Nigeria as a child. I think there was always like a disconnect in a way because, I could hear my parents talking to family members and I read stuff on TV or I see stuff on TV and read stuff in magazines, but it was very different from actually being able to experience Nigeria. And so that definitely had an impact on me as well.
The project that I'm working on right now is an animation of African Dad. So I've written 4 seasons of it, and it ranges from adolescence to to teenagehood to pre-adulthood and adulthood. 8 to 12 episodes each one. And the reason why I did that is because I was like, I don't want to dress up to be African Dad. I used to do that in my older videos, and I was so happy that one of my videos went viral of me just doing the voiceover. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to dress up anymore. I was like, it just takes a lot. Like you're doing different scenes, your turn. I didn't know. I was like, oh, this is perfect. That it went so viral. I was like, oh, I don't ever have to dress up as African. Like I can, after this episode, I can send you like literally where it stopped. And it was right in 2024.
Oh, wow.
Literally right in 2024. I did the, when your parents buy in bulk video.
Oh, yeah.
And that video went so viral, I did another one. That one viral, I did another one. That I was like, oh my God, I don't have to dress up anymore. People are just liking the voiceover part of it. And that was right in 2024. And that's when I stopped dressing up and doing that. But before that, I was dressing up in African Dad. But for the animation, obviously I want to play African Dad. I would play myself, and they're full fledged out stories. It splits reality and animation. So in the beginning, it would be like a place like this. I would have African, Nigerian tones and stuff, and I would speak to you about the premise of what is going to be happening. Like, let's say we work from home. It's like, oh, Nigerians working is hard work, struggle, and this is, but it's going to be talking about the work from home stuff. That's the animation where it's going to go to. So it's like it snaps to animation. So it's like a full episode and a full story. That's like my biggest thing that I've been working on my project right now. I'm actually talking to an animator right now because I want to make a concept trailer, a scissor reel. I wish I could make the whole episode and put it out, like just to show, but that's like 6,000 a minute animation. It's very expensive. Y'all, extremely expensive. So I just want to make like a scissor reel concept trailer, sort of like how Bel Air did, and then pretty much a show, because it's insane to me the amount of people that relate to it. Nigerians, obviously, Ghanaians, Liberians, Caribbean people, Jamaicans, Trinidadians, Asian people like Chinese, Indian people, even white people, Italians. Like, look, my parents is like that. My parents is like that. My parents just act just like that. So I'm like, Hispanics as well. It's like, oh, I can't believe everybody relates to this. It's just all first generation or children of immigrant parents.
Yeah, they understand. Yeah,
they understand, and they all, and the show is a love letter to parents. I've had people come with like, oh, this is abuse, this is the thing. I love my parents. I love the way they raised me. They raised me in the best way they saw fit, and sometimes it was yelling, it was trying to get their point across in a way that probably wasn't receptive to me as I was younger. But now that I think about it, that's why I make the videos. I was like, why you did forget to unlock the door, you didn't take the chicken out the freezer, why, like, you know what I mean, this why. And I'm older now, so I'm like, oh, this is kind of crazy, like, why didn't you do that? You're drinking right now, maybe you shouldn't be drinking, like stuff like that. So to me, the show is a love letter to my parents, and I named it It's Not That Serious, because I think that just makes more sense, because it's like you're spasm, it's just not that serious. So it's like a love letter to my parents to pretty much say that I appreciate the way you brought me up, but this is still funny, like the way you did. So that's like my biggest project right now. So I hope that goes well.
I'm a Ghanaian American, first generation, but each place that you listed that I've lived, I've kind of used that as a benefit of adding to who I can become. And more importantly, I think it's made me always consider and appreciate not just my background, but the background of all the people that I come in contact with. I think there's a very important aspect of being able to integrate how you value others around you. And so, if anything, I think having some sort of background and story that I can tie myself to with my parents, with my community, and people that are an extension of it, has sort of kind of allowed me to put myself in a perspective of others, but I'm also curious to learn more about them because I know that there are a lot of commonalities and differences between us all.
In what ways do you think maybe that's been an advantage for you? I mean, I think we both know America is very diverse, but when you do maybe have that cultural lens, right, to where you can maybe have an innate understanding that everyone's context is maybe different because of their culture or their ethnicity or whatever, do you think that has maybe served as an advantage to you, whether you're navigating personal relationships or your career working in architecture?
Sure. I would say for a lot of various fields, there are a lot of people that come from various backgrounds. And so in some way, being a minority can almost make you the majority. I think there's a lot of power in being able to connect with people and understand that we may not have the same exact path, but we might have similar paths. But more importantly, I think being able to connect with people means that you can take a number of values or principles that exist within your culture and then start to understand exactly how you can make these connections, not just with people, but the work that you do. And I would say with the work that I do, I feel like it's always important to make sure that people are in some way the center of it, like whether it's the community or just the context of the space that you have to look at with a certain lens. I think that brings value to the work that's being done. It's the final block or the final piece that ultimately brings the satisfaction of the effort and time you put into designing something or just dedicating something that's supposed to be used by the public.
Knowing that you do have Ghanaian heritage, but you grow up, you were you were born and raised in America, assuming you're going to have kids that are probably going to be American too. Like how do you maybe think about the preservation of your own Ghanaian heritage? This is something I think about a lot in terms of knowing when I have kids, they're going to be even further disconnected from Ghana, and thinking about ways like, how can I make sure that this stays in the bloodline, right? Because when you're not on the when you're not in the motherland, so to speak, it can feel more disconnected. And so I'm wondering in what ways, if you've maybe even thought about this at all, or from a practical lens, maybe right now in this moment, how are you thinking about the preservation of your heritage when it is so easy to assimilate American, American culture or everything else going on around you?
Um, that's a really good question. I think what I've been actively trying to do is I acknowledge that I'm getting older, and in some way, I'm reaching a stage where I may have thought it would have been a little bit further out, right? Um, like we're getting to the point where we can kind of understand exactly what our parents were trying to do at the same age, because this is roughly around the time that they made that big jump or that big move. And so, more importantly, I think keeping that in mind, I realize that there are a lot of natural things that you can do on a day to day that help keep some of those things alive. Things like music or food, right? That's really easy. It's very consumable. And then I think there are more hard hitting things like language, which could be a really big factor. Um, and then I think moving forward, I realize that there's a lot of power to understand what you want to pull from each aspect of your life experience. And so finding out the things that I can do to remember and pass those down have really started to hit home as I'm getting older. So like I think having more one-on-one conversations with my grandparents and just trying to understand like what they were going through around that time period that they were growing up, it's very significant because when you look at a timeline, you start to realize that although they may have been in their home country, this may have aligned with this historical event that happened in America. And so you can start to picture exactly how things may have been drastically different or similar. And then I think from there, it's also just like understanding that, you have a different path or journey that you're on. And you can incorporate a lot of what you're actively seeing now along with the things that you've been taught by your parents. So with that sort of being said, um, there's this thing that I've been trying to do lately where I take some time, at least one day of the week, like on a Sunday, and I do like a voice recording to talk about how my week went. But I try to be fairly thorough and really talk about, maybe the ups and downs, the things that were challenging. Because I knew that, growing up, it was a very community-based experience. People talk about, being raised by a village, and I think that means a lot because your parents can be there to support you and provide you with everything that you need. But if you don't have the resource directly in front of you, then there's always someone else around you that can also help you support. And so with that being said, I think there was always a way to get to the same conclusion, but more of like a conglomerate way. And I'm hoping that through my experience, there might be a more direct connection, more so with my kid, because not only did I get to experience things with my parents as they were finding their way in a new country, trying to build a life, but I'm also actively living in a world where, I'm witnessing firsthand things that they may have not seen. And so that's all going to be vital information for my kids in the future. I think being able to offer both of those things to my kid in a very like passive way through my parents telling me, but also me sort of testing some of those things that they may have told me, and then sort of understanding in real time what adjustments need to be made, is a really informative way of sort of sharing that. And so that's what those voice recordings are for. They could be about, you know, what were things like looking for different jobs, or, you know, what was this music festival like that I went to, or, you know, what happened the day that I turned 30, like things of that nature. I think being able to just talk about little things, but also just remind them that you're human, at a time where they may not be able to either understand what you're saying at a young age, or you just may be a little bit too old for them to actually listen. I
Yeah.
think having that proof might be a really helpful way, and something that I kind of just thought of as, you know, it would have been nice to get more of these from my parents, even though I still have the one-on-one conversations. But now I can leave the one-on-one conversations and eventually start to take it from a different angle.
What led, because that's really a really cool idea that you've started, right? It's essentially a digital diary almost. And I guess you don't do it like with a camera, but just those audio recordings will kind of live forever, right? So I guess what maybe, what experience did you have, or what realization did you come to that made you think that like this is important for me to do? Is it because maybe you wished you had that, or some form from from your parents or grandparents or whatever? Like what maybe led to that aha, like this is an important way for me to document what's going on in real time?
Yeah. I was thinking of ease. So just being able to do something quick, fast, that I knew no matter what would happen throughout the week, I would always have time for. And then another was, as I was conducting research, I think I was in Copenhagen trying to find a barber shop to get a haircut. And I randomly went to a shop and I met a man who was also like first gen, except he was from Egypt. And, while he was cutting my hair, he was basically telling me how he moved there when he was, you know, roughly 19 or 20. He saved up some money and bought the barber shop. But then he also started talking about like his actual life experiences in terms of like maybe his concerns for the future for his kids. Being a little bit worried that they may not remember the original country that he had come from. I think actively witnessing how his kids had to really put themselves in a new environment in order to adjust because of this move that he had made. And I think I was recording myself walking through town and completely forgot to stop recording. So by the time I sat in the barber shop, I now recorded this full 45-minute conversation that I was having with him. And it was a really good exchange, and it happened naturally because, you know, someone from across the world just flew to your country and randomly stumbled upon your barbershop. So you're just as curious as I am when I'm navigating this city, trying to understand more about it. So ironically, just seeing someone who'd taken a very similar path to my parents, I think gave me an avenue to start asking some of these questions in terms of like his concerns, what makes him happy, the opportunities that he's had. And he gave me a very like clear, blunt response for each question. And then more importantly, I think he was sort of happy and also laughing at the fact that I caught the recording, because he felt like it was a really good conversation to have. He'd never really had anybody ask him that series of questions before. And so it was a really good takeaway. And I think it started to influence the way that I wanted to look at just the overall experience about being in a different country, because that's sort of the closest thing for the moment that I can sort of understand with my parents in terms of coming here and making adjustments and having to go out and find these things that you need, and just hoping that you can find everything.
You mentioned the kind of connection between this Egyptian gentleman's story and kind of the story of your family, right? Your parents coming here. I'm wondering how has being like a second generation African, like first generation of your family to like kind of be born and raised here, how do you think that has maybe shaped your mentality, your drive, how you attack life, knowing what your family gave up, what they sacrificed, what they went through, the hopes and dreams they had to come here? How was all of that informed and molded your approach now?
Yeah, I would say the focus relatively stays the same, but there are periods where it constantly sways back and forth. Um, More importantly, I think I learned a lot of valuable things like, hard work, or I think having a level head. And so, like, maintaining my emotions and learning how to communicate when things aren't going the right way. I think more importantly, I think whenever I have a conversation or whenever I come across a situation, um, I try to put myself in the other person's shoes. And I think it helps me look at things openly. I think being able to grow up in a space where conversation is critically important, whether it's in one language or another, I think you're still able to understand that the emotions that you go through are, emotions that we all deal with. I think being able to talk about those things is important. And then, yeah, I think understanding that all progress takes a good amount of work and things just don't happen by day. You could be spending endless time towards the things that you're striving for. And, in due time, you'll accomplish those things. So you can't necessarily put a rush on stuff. Uh, I think there's a rough saying, and I don't know if I'll remember it, but
It's all good.
yeah, I think people say that, you know, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so as long as you consistently work towards your goals, you'll most likely achieve them. Now, you can't necessarily beg for the things to happen immediately, but I think naturally, like all things, they take time. And part of that also means enjoying the process and the journey that comes with it. Because it's very often that once we get something or we achieve something, we have that, very quick moment of satisfaction, and then we want the next thing. And so there's a lot of joy that comes with actually taking those steps before you arrive at the thing that you want.
I'm wondering though, for you, Paul, being an engineer, because a big stereotype of like African parents is that they want their kids to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or a failure. You got to be one of those options,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so you did decide to be an engineer, right? A chemical engineer. So I'm wondering, how do you make sure that you're doing it for yourself and not because of because of parental or familial expectations coming from a Nigerian family?
Yeah, I think whether it's stated or it's just implied, it's always going to be there. Because I would say, and I had a recent conversation with a guest about this, is that my parents were definitely more laid back about whether you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or disappointment. They never said that, but it was very clear that they said, like, we like you to go to college, choose something where you're going to actually make money, not just go to college just for the sake of going to college. So my dad was an engineer. He studied engineer. He doesn't practice as an engineer anymore. And so he never said I should study engineering, but it's just one of those things that I knew if I did it, he would like it. Uh,
Mm.
I think I've always been, and either my mom, my dad, any of my siblings will tell you this, is that I'm kind of a stubborn person in the sense that I'm not going to do something just because you tell me to do something. I want to make sure that I actually want to do that thing. So I know not everyone is like that to the sense that maybe they have some of the pressure. And it's, I guess, even what I said earlier, like, how do I reconcile the fact that I'm stubborn, but I'm also a people pleaser? I don't know. I think it just happens. It just
Uh,
depends on what it is. And I don't think I'm as stubborn in everything. So certain things I know I'm like, especially when I was trying to choose my career. For the longest time, I did not want to be an engineer
mm.
because I wanted to do something different. I was like, my dad's an engineer. I want to do something different. I want to become a doctor. And then when I was thinking for myself what I really wanted to do, I was like, oh shoot, I actually do want to be an engineer.
I didn't speak, Igbo, which was my parents' native language. I primarily spoke English. And then as I went through schooling, I was speaking Latin and Spanish and stuff like that. And for me, I just, maybe, and a lot of people say like they're kind of like they're balancing like two different cultures, or consider themselves to be like a third culture kid. So I definitely felt that because it was very different, from my school environment and like activities environment versus my home environment. But I think for me, like, it provided me with, I would say, like a richer experience in a way, because I
Mm.
felt like I had a more, let's say, like worldly view, because I was able to understand, like, like the immigrant experience in a way, versus, just like the, not Native American, but just like the general like American experience. And I
Yeah.
think, again, that had like a big impact on me positively.
How do you think maybe that has empowered you, maybe having that global mindset? Because I kind of found myself growing up feeling the same way, like almost embracing all the different, like there are a lot of immigrant kids at the schools I went to growing up, and you feel like you almost you look at the world so much differently because you're black, but you're also kind of from an immigrant family. Did you feel empowered uh, in that way as well? And I guess today in your work, do you feel like you have that global mindset because of that experience?
Oh yeah, even definitely, like when I was growing up, I was just always interested in different cultures, and that's also why I was very interested in anthropology as well,
Mhm.
because I could see, I just like loved understanding the human experience and all that comes with it as well. And then also, I think that this played a big role in because I didn't actually go travel outside the United States until I went to college
Oh
for
wow.
study abroad, and so even then, like. I think that was like the stepping stone to also like, building upon like my just like third hand or second hand experiences, with understanding different cultures from like, TV, magazines, like newspapers, for example. But since then, I've been to almost 40 countries. And so I think that
Wow.
has played a big role in terms of like uh, expanding my global mindset even further.
Does Dr. Okolo today see herself as living between cultures, living between America and Nigeria? Would you describe yourself as that, or would you almost feel you would, or do you almost feel like you're more Nigerian than ever just because of the work you've done on the continent? How would you maybe describe where you fall on that scale today?
Yeah, I would say, definitely the latter more so like, more Nigerian, obviously. And because I think for me, it feels nice because also gotten a lot of recognition from like Nigerian platforms and media outlets, which has been great because, obviously like when you see my name, like you know that I'm Nigerian, no matter
Yeah.
what. And obviously then when people hear what I sound like, okay, they're like, oh, okay, she's also American too.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
Nigeria, always comes first. And so that's how I would say like I, envision my identity as well.
Going to school pretty young, I think like it was pretty common for people to like make fun of people that were African. That
Facts.
some seemed to be a commonality. I obviously acknowledged that there was no hiding from that. Like my name pretty much told it all. And I didn't really have an issue with it. However, like it wasn't something that I was necessarily like outwardly spoken about just because there weren't many that I knew growing up. Up until you get to those higher levels of education to where it's like middle school and now high school where there seems to be more people like you and you seem to be more expressive about it or just be more I guess you could say open to talking about it. In the past, I generally just wouldn't say anything. Like, and because I don't necessarily have an accent, there's no one like,
Yeah.
oh, he's African, this, that, and the third. I just sound like I'm American. Until they either hear my last name or like say my mom would come to school and then they'd hear her speaking to me, and it's like, oh yeah, I didn't know he was. So it's like one of those things. However, like when you get to college, there's like so much more exposure culturally, and it's like, oh, now there's like a large group or these associations of like African students and people that are also from the same country. So like you become more open to embracing that and just speaking about it and just having no problem with having to worry about anybody criticizing or saying anything like that. But like I'd say since the age of maybe 16, 17, I was just like, bro, I like if anything, it's who I am, and that's something that I've always been proud of. My willingness to speak about it has been more of a commonality just because I'm now in an industry that requires you to have those characteristics and traits that like can stand out compared to others. Like the cultural background that we do have has really influenced a lot of the designing that I do. Just being able to consider like cultural perspectives and
Hmm.
how you can kind of build different products with techniques and forms that like people from our country would or from other countries would. So that's just something that I've kind of learned to be, I guess, more outwardly open about as I've gotten older. And that's kind of been who I am today.
So kind of going off of that though, Max, like specifically, like you're describing it as almost a prerequisite, almost to kind of do what you do in the sports product design space. And I know specifically you've done like a lot of work with like kits and whatnot. Like I've
Yeah,
seen on your website, like you had a kit, a potential kit for like the Ghana national team,
yeah,
the like the Black Stars, the soccer team. And so
yeah.
I'm wondering though, like, I guess coming from a background like yours, how exactly does that give you a specific advantage though? Is it more so just the awareness of having stories that, knowing that there are stories like yours out there, because anyone can do a job, right? So is it more so the innate cultural sensitivity you have and the awareness to that you think serves you in a space like yours?
Yeah, I would say that for sure. I mean, like, growing up in our culture, there's just like a lot of things that you're exposed to outside of just like the cultural traditions that we tend to participate in. We're talking about like being exposed to sports that most people in America aren't watching in their everyday life. So soccer was that for me at an early age. Understanding how important it was to the nation of Ghana, going to Ghana in 2010, being there for the World Cup at the same time, really made me realize like just how big it was, watching the team reach its point. But then like as I got older, it was like, okay, you're watching these people in the industry design like jerseys for the World Cup, and they're designing it for like all of these African teams that a lot of these countries have similar colors in their flags, so the uniforms are going to be similar in color. However,
Mm.
what these people don't understand is like these countries have differences in culture. Um, Despite us being in the same region, there's a differentiation between each and every one of our cultures that make us special, and those are things that I felt like needed to kind of be represented and told in those uniforms, and not just in Africa, but like in every other country as well. Like the World Cup is like the opportunity for people to learn and understand the significance of different cultures. As someone that comes from a culturally rich nation, like you understand just how important that is to other people as well. And that's something that you want to see be reflected in the uniforms. So when you don't see it growing up, it's something that you feel like you need to do, which is what kind of inspired me designing those kits. But then also makes me realize that if I can understand that there are valuable pieces and significance within each and every one of these different nations, then I can do that for other countries as well, as long as I am considering what those people value. So whether it be talking to people from those countries or going to that country in itself and visiting and embracing the culture myself, there are levels to it that I think are really important that many people don't consider. So I think understanding that doesn't happen unless I come from where we come from. You know what I mean?
Does Femi mean anything in Nigerian or in Uganda, or do you have a middle name that maybe symbolizes something as well?
So yeah, so my Femi is short, but my full name is Olufemi, and it means God
Okay.
loves me in Yoruba.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's it's like my dad is Europe. He's from the Yoruba tribe in
Got it.
Nigeria, and it means God loves me. And like yeah, it's like and it doesn't even have to have like a big meaning or anything like that for
Yeah.
like whatever names I end up giving my kids. Like if I'm fortunate enough to have them, it doesn't have to be like a massive meaning, but I would just want something that would like be like a little bit unique based on what they would like kind of like typically see from like your like American born child or whatever that's like who knows like 17th generation or whatever, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
where it's like it's been so like where they just feel like they're American or whatever. But yeah, like I would try to make it something to where like they would at least be like, okay, like it's like a little bit different. So like, where did this
Yeah.
come from? Like, where are we from? Like, where are our grandparents from? Where are our great grandparents from? Like asking those kinds of questions is something that I would want for my kids if I'm hopefully lucky enough to have them.
For sure. No, I love that. I mean, obviously, my first name is very just English or whatever, but my
Mhm.
middle name has meaning in Ghana, Yao Jimfi. It means I was born on Thursday. In Ghana, they
Nice.
have certain names for certain days
For
of
the
the week.
days? Hell
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And that because that's such a fascinating thing because like I always like one way that like I would get like anxiety a little bit is like first day of school for sure when it's like because my last
Oh
name of
yeah.
Ebefe, it's AB like that like
Someone's gonna
it's
mess it
right
up.
at the top. It's right at
Yeah,
the top.
yeah, yeah.
So like it's like all right, we're gonna kick off roll. Happy New Year, everybody! Like welcome to this school year. You know, Femi, a BB feet. Like it's like I'm like
Oh my God.
yeah. I'm like Lord have mercy. I'm like all
Oh
right,
man, and to kick it off to like to kick off the
exactly.
roll call is
It
crazy.
kicks off the roll call. And like, yeah,
Yeah.
like I have friends that kind of giggle or whatever because it's like, oh, she butchered your name, whatever. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
man, and like they would obviously get it after like the first couple days of school, but then now the substitute teacher comes in.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? and now it's just like, man, now I gotta go through all of this all over again. Come on,
Oh,
dog.
man.
Like, you know,
That's
it's
crazy.
yeah, it was like that was a thing that like and like even till this day like I'll like kind of like tell my wife a little bit because like sometimes like certain airlines like you know you fly like you scan your boarding pass or whatever and they'll be like oh like it's like have a nice flight insert name here and like my full name is on my plane ticket
Oh
that's what
yeah.
my ID is and I'm like I'm always just like this is like high school all over again it's like middle school
Yeah.
all over again and like it's like oh have a nice flight Olufemi I'm like Olufemi is how I say it and it's like oh okay have a nice flight. And like
Yeah.
I know they mean well and they're trying to
Yeah.
make it like personal and all that stuff, but I'm just like, man, just ask me. Don't even try to say it. Just ask me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I'll tell you. And you can say it.
Facts.
And I'm like, great, let's keep it pushing. But yeah,
Facts.
like that's one of the things that like growing up was just like a minor inconvenience. Like I'm very proud of my name. I would never ever change my name. In fact, I was asked when I started in this business, my first job, I was asked like, hey, like, would you be interested in changing your name? And I said, absolutely not. Like my name is my name. I'm very proud of it. And the people will get to learn to know how to say it. And they did. So yeah, it's like I'm very proud of it and everything, but just a minor inconvenience with growing up with a name that not too many people are familiar with.
That's crazy that they tried to get you to change your name. Like, did they want something simpler or whiter for the air or
I think it was just like something that was like easier to say. And like they didn't like push hard. It was just like
I
hey,
see.
like, do you ever think about changing your name? And I was like, no. And then
Yeah.
that was the end of the conversation because like
Yeah.
I think they saw that like oh, okay like this guy like he's not gonna ever change his name, which I never would have. But I think it was just like oh
Interesting.
like because it's like in Central Oregon was my first job, so like I
Yeah.
don't even like I can't remember the last person who was Nigerian that rolled through Bend, Oregon. You know, it might have been me. You know what I mean? And it's been and I left that place in 2016, so it's been a long time. But I think it was just like okay, like let's get something that's like easy to say for not just like our anchors and reporters or whatever, but also for the viewers to be like, oh, like that's so and so. I don't know what they wanted me to
Okay.
change it to. If they wanted to be like Femi Johnson or something like that. Like, I don't know what you guys are
No, that'd
thinking,
be
but
crazy regardless.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, I don't know what you want, but like it's Femi and Bebefe, and that's my name. It's what I'm gonna go by, and people will learn it and they will love it. And people they learned it, they loved me in Ben. So yeah, it was just like a thing that they just asked out of curiosity, and I was like, nah, like this ain't a conversation. We're not doing it.
When we talked the other day, you know what I'm going to mention, but that baton analogy, been thinking a lot about that. And for those of you listening, so essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like essentially you were saying like your life is like almost like this track, so to speak, like track in terms of track and field, and like your parents being the like coming to the US from Ghana, them being the sprinters in a relay. But you were saying that you don't feel like you're the person receiving the baton to keep going and keep running. You feel like you're the baton itself, which I think is super deep. But what exactly did you mean by that?
You hit on this earlier, and I think it's the fact that you still have that connection to where your parents are from. You're almost the remnants of who your parents are. And because of that, I think the concern that you have for the next generation, that the kids you're going to raise, right? They're going to have that complete disconnection, right? Like you're raising them. You're not necessarily your parents because you didn't grow up back home.
Yeah.
You're this new production of your parents. And with that, I think you can completely change the game. I think you matter just as equally, but just in a different way. And so you fall short, then that changes the outcome. Or if you succeed and find the jewels that your parents have been trying to dig for, then now your kids can run away with something way more valuable. And so I kind of just see it as like being that step towards the true success. I think there's a very common like goal for a lot of families that move here is to, grant their kids an opportunity to have a very ambitious hobby or job that makes them happy. And with that, the return allows them to sort of bypass the struggle that comes with being that first generation. And so with all the tips, the valuable lessons, the voice recordings, the videos, they can hopefully hit the ground running a whole lot faster than you did because you had to sort of take half and half. So it's really up to you to figure out how you can just, mold this culture, this identity that you have into something that maybe weighs a little bit less and makes it a whole lot easier for them to just keep running with whatever your parents started with.
What is the autonomy that we can find in our own lives when it's like it's almost our responsibility to be the bridge? Like, what if we don't want to be the bridge? What if we want to be, what if we want to find our own autonomy within that, like find our own path? Like, what if we don't want to connect to our, to the roots, to the cultural roots? Like, how does, I guess, I don't know if I'm even making sense, but I'm just thinking like, because of that nuanced space we're in when we're not maybe 100% one or the other, like how do you think about, I guess, the choices that we make or that we have to make in life when it's kind of hard to fully identify with one thing, if that makes sense?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think that's a journey that everyone else has to go on. Just because I wouldn't say you're stuck in a mold when you think about the physical sense of the baton.
Yeah.
I think the ability to constantly have power to change the narrative is the way I see the value of the baton. You can still get to the finish line, but if you don't have the baton, then technically you're disqualified, correct? So I think that always reinstitutes the value of how each piece is still important. But I think the pass and the handoff, that connection, right? That's really up to the person. So whether it's the stories, the food, the language, in some way, the way that your kids receive that is based on your responses to it.
Yeah.
So if you feel like, oh, like growing up, this is my favorite meal, then I feel like that aspect of you having that joy and happiness of it is always going to constantly notify your kids like, oh, like this is what my dad eats all the time.
Yeah.
And then I think there are things that will still find their way and trickle down to your kids. And they may never have to come across through you. I think that's that idea of the relay team, is that you're still a team at the end of the day. So the relationship between the first runner and the second runner is still there. But I think in order to efficiently get the job done, understanding what you feel like is important in terms of establishing your own identity, but also maybe preserving those before you and trying to help shape a bigger and brighter identity for the one that's ahead of you, kind of reinstitutes why that connection between the two people being the baton is so important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think a part of it too is like, as the baton, like there is a letting go, like a surrender that has to take place when you are that connection to your offspring, right? Like it's almost a sense of like you did everything you can, and now it's like, okay, you son or daughter, like now it's up to you to make your own interpretation of how you saw that I approached it, and you can run with it however you want, but it's just almost the satisfaction, knowing, like you said, that it is a team, but it is almost about the satisfaction of knowing that you maybe did everything in your power with the perspective you have to like give them the best give them the best position, the best starting point, right? We try to take it another step further in a different context, right? We're doing it the best way we know how. I think
best way we know how is a good way to put it. You just have firsthand exposure to whatever that original identity was. And so I think that was like the rough way of kind of viewing it at the time, because I knew that going through a lot of these challenges or pitfalls that you were talking about, I'm actively feeling like I don't have the answers. I don't have the solutions. And so hopefully that isn't another wall that my kids would have to bump into, because I'd be there to kind of coach them through some of these experiences. And it sort of, in some degree, it shows itself early. Like I feel like even being an older sibling, there's a little bit of that there, where you're navigating things in life. You understand like, oh, I tried that, it didn't really work, or oh, I tried that, I wasted a lot of time. And now I can relay that to my brother and just kind of let him know, like, if this is something that you're trying to explore or something that you're starting to understand doesn't make any sense, this may be the reason. So just pay attention. And I think just not necessarily telling him what to do, but telling him to be mindful of what the landscape looks like allows him to really look at things the right way and choose how he wants to navigate it, compared to me not really having a clue when I first stepped out there.
Yeah. So through those bumps that you've been through, like in your being in your own journey of figuring it out, what have been some ways that you've learned that have worked in terms of maybe dealing with that balance and in finding yourself within kind of that strange nuanced space that we find ourselves in? What has worked for you in the pain?
Continuing to ask questions is a big part. I think accepting that life, you'll never stop learning. And more importantly, I think finding mentors in those spaces that um, that might be a little bit more foreign to people in your community who can do the best they can to help. But at some point professionally, you may have to find someone who may have followed the same exact path that you have, or at least knows what that challenge looks like in hindsight. Um, yeah, and I think more importantly, I think looking at all of that and understanding that each of these, I think each of these experiences bring a set of challenges, and a lot of these challenges are achievable. But more importantly, what you do afterwards is important. So, like, I think understanding that one day you're gonna have to be the person that you were looking for when you were growing up is a really big aspect of anything that you choose to pursue in the future. Um, you know how it feels. You know exactly what hurdles and blocks you came across. You understand how frustrating it can be. So just being that voice for someone goes a really long way. I think it starts to change the way that you look at a number of fields where representation is sort of like shifted or grown in multiple directions. A lot of that comes with the fact that um, someone saw you do something that they may have had an idea in the back of the mind that they may have wanted to do. And by seeing you and asking you questions, you kind of encouraged that pursuit for them.
You mentioned maybe being able to tap into your Nigerian roots more as you got into college. But I guess how has that maybe changed your outlook and perspective on, like, I guess how you carry yourself? Not that you didn't have like a higher standard or whatever before, but just kind of with that evolution, right?
Yeah.
Starting to embody maybe your Nigerian roots more as you got older. How did that maybe change, I guess, the way you navigated the world around you?
Yeah, I would say, college, as I mentioned previously, was the turning point for me in understanding and also primarily identifying as Nigerian. And also, I would say, over the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity, to visit Nigeria, and then also even engage with the Nigerian government on different topics. I'm very active, on like the Nigerian side of Twitter as well. And I also think that's also, provided me a good opportunity actually, like, to learn more about Nigerian culture, even though it's kind of like a secondhand experience on Twitter. But it's just interesting because I'm seeing tweets and videos and stuff pretty much every day. And I think that it's helped me, understand my identity both as a Nigerian and also someone who grew up in America as well. And so even, from when I was in college, I wanted to find a way to understand how to tie my career into working in the African continent somehow, particularly in Nigeria. And to be very frank, even though I'm not necessarily happy with the current administration, I think that there's so much potential that, Nigerians in Nigeria have, and also those in the diaspora. And so I definitely, want to find more ways to contribute back home, and also particularly in the region I'm from, or the state, in Anambra State. And so I'm looking forward to figuring that out over the next couple of years.
You're African. You was growing up in the States, but Black folks might not recognize you as one of them, and your people who were born back home might not recognize you as much as one of them.
Exactly.
I remember, at times, grappling with, like, why are my Somali friends giving me a hard time for not speaking the language as good as them? I was born here. I speak the language, right? But I was born here. But for my friends that are born back home, who spent years living back home, understanding, learning the mother tongue, and being immersed in that, right? Sometimes I'd get jokes, and they meant well. They didn't. I don't think they meant harm, but the jokes would be, "Oh, he doesn't know the language or the mother tongue really well." So it's this thing of, well, you're not American enough, you're not Somali enough. You're in this weird area where you're kind of tiptoeing in between.
That's my entire life, bro.
acceptance.
That's my entire life.
Yeah,
So how
yeah.
so how did you deal with that, right? Maybe I think what you're saying, it was kind of difficult for you. I guess what maybe got you through that, or how did you maybe deal with those challenges when you do feel like you don't feel like you fit in to any one camp, being somewhere in between?
Y- yeah, it's something, especially in high school, you know, shout out to my Somali homies. Love them till this day. And they would sometimes crack jokes, say, "Hey, how come you hang out with other groups?" Because everybody in high school had their own group, their own tribe, right? And we were kind of, to a degree, segregating ourselves. Right? Everybody has their own group in high school, right? And they would make this joke, and they would mock me, like, "Hey, how come you hanging out with all these other people? We're your people. You should hang out with us." And I think I
Mhm.
always, growing up, I always had this curiosity of maybe, maybe I'm gonna step out the box. I'm gonna step out the box. I'm gonna do what most people may not feel comfortable doing. I'm gonna go hang out with people that don't look like me. You know, that has been a theme of my life of going out the box. Like my first job out of college, I moved from San Diego, California, where all my friends and family are at, all the way to Orlando, Florida. Right.
Oh wow.
Most people that I talked to about that decision, Ben, they said, "What are you doing? Don't do it. You're leaving your family, you're leaving your culture, you're leaving your people. Don't do it." Right. So all throughout my life, that's been a theme of doing what could be considered to a degree unconventional. Um, that's been a big theme. And for me, I always had faith in God and faith in myself that, hey, you know, trust that you're making a good decision. Trust that you're making a decision that's going to help you down the line. And because I made that decision to be uncomfortable, right? You know, all throughout middle school and high school and college, breaking the mold, you know, joining organizations on campus, joining a fraternity, right? Doing all these different things that most people would say, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing?"
Mhm.
That all those accumulation of experiences that has allowed me to speak freely on stage. That has allowed me to take on career opportunities and move, right? With minimal friction upon internally for myself, right? I'm able to make these bigger decisions because I was able to break out the mold early on. So for those of you watching, you can still you can still be a part of your culture, be a part of your community, and still, step out the little box that the world has created for you.
You still have that love for your culture and your heritage, even
Always.
though you did uh, break away in a degree to sort of go after kind of your dreams, goals, whatever. I guess as that has kind of stayed with you, how has that maybe shaped your mindset, right, in terms of how you attack your life, maybe personally, but also work,
Yeah.
business?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So for me, you have to understand, right? I grew up in San Diego. I was born and raised there. That's all I knew for most of my life. So for me to leave that, right? That was a very scary decision. It was a very scary decision. However, you in life, you don't know if things were a great decision or a bad decision until years down the line. You won't know. You won't know. You won't like. Time will have to pass for you to have a non-emotional audit and say, was this a good decision or not? Right. For me, that making decisions like that, making decisions to break away, as scary as they are, that's helped me understand that if you want to be a leader in any vocation, in any profession, in any discipline, you have to be comfortable making uncomfortable decisions. You have to be comfortable with being in environments where you're meeting people from all walks of life and you're interacting with them, not just surface level, right? In a more humane, deeper level, right? I have found the most effective leaders in across any discipline that you could think of. They could be music artists, actors, they could be doctors, NFL coaches, right? Anybody, right? Whatever you could think of. I have found that those who lead at the highest level, they have the ability to see the humanity and build relationships across party lines, across religious lines, across national lines, across ethnic lines, right? And for me, that's the type of person I aspire to be. I aspire to be someone who could touch the hearts of many people and be of service to all of humanity. To be that type of leader, for me, I always had to make sure that, hey, make these tough decisions so you could be a better leader, right? So you're asking me, hey, how has making these tough decisions to, break out of the homogenous community, great community that I have, how does it feel? How does that shape my decisions? How does that shape me today? Well, today I bring that attitude of like, hey, it doesn't matter what room I'm in. I believe I'm able to connect to someone. There's some relatability somewhere. It's only a matter of time where we discover that, and that's what we're going to connect on, right? So for me, making those tough decisions, breaking out of the mold, that allows me to be a better leader. And I think great leaders need to be able to touch anybody, be cool with anybody, learn from anybody.
How did you maybe look at your kind of unique sense of identity, right? Because that's a unique blend. So I guess did you see yourself as just more African American? Did you see yourself as just not Nigerian? Kind of when I think I'm a little bit younger than you, but when I was coming up, it was kind of weird to be African a little bit. That didn't start to change until many years later, I think, when I started to get into college. But I'm just curious for you, in your experience growing up, how did you look at yourself?
Yeah, there's a lot of elements to that. I think it wasn't just the African, Black American. It was also being from Oakland, California, which is it's a very diverse place. The Bay Area is actually like very diverse. You see all different types of culture. They all kind of intermix to a certain extent. So being from Oakland, California, I went to high school and middle school in a place called Danville, California, which is like one of the most, wealthiest gated community, areas. It was like an hour plus away from where I lived. I had to take like, it was an hour and 30 minutes for me to commute to school every day. And when you add on basketball practices and things like that, it was tricky. And so, it's all white school, very small school. And so there's a lot of different things when it came to play of like identity in terms of like how I fit into everything. I always felt that there was like this energy of like the Nigerians specifically, but Africans in general, who were like 100% African, who both of their parents were from Nigeria or both of their parents were from Africa, versus the ones that were like half, you know what I'm saying? So like we would do it'd be a lot of functions and things like that. And I always got that energy. And I was, for me, again, I went to Nigeria when I was really young, and my dad didn't teach me how to speak, Igbo. There's a lot of things that I was disconnected with from my Nigerian side. My grandmother on my dad's side went to live with us for a period of time when I was growing up, and that was a real opportunity for me to get a little bit closer with her. But even still, there's language barriers. There's, it was just I wasn't fully ingratiated into my Nigerian side. So, I think I always felt that energy from people that were 100% Nigerian. I always felt like, something there, but I always just embraced being who I was. I never really I was always confident because I think, one of the elements that my dad instilled in me that I think is very traditional Nigerians is just whatever you do, be the best at it, be a leader, be disciplined. He would threaten to take me to Nigeria like every year for boarding school, like damn near every year. If I had like one grade that I had a B+ in, or like one slip up on anything, like every year he would threaten to send me to boarding school in Nigeria, like literally every year. You know what I'm saying? So it was just one of those things where I always looked at it as like, be the best, no matter what you do, be a leader, be disciplined, and be comfortable being in your own skin. And I think that even from a young age, that always kind of stuck out with me. Like I never really had this pressure of being something else or feeling less than because of X, Y, and Z with my demographic or identity. That never was an issue for me. And so, fast forward to when I started my video production company, which is called Add Color. My whole motto with that was you have to add your uniqueness into the world because we all have something to offer, right? And that's just something I live by to this day. You're a uniquely talented individual. There's never been somebody like you in the history of the world, and there never will be somebody like you ever again. So, embrace that, make your mark, and add color. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm all about. So even at an early age, I always had that mentality of I knew I was a little bit different in the environments that I was in, but it was like a badge of like honor. Like I loved that. I embraced that. Like it was dope to me, you know?
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of add off of that, Amechi, just the fact that you were kind of part of so many different environments, right? Like African American, Nigerian American, growing up in a diverse area like the Bay Area, going to an all white, maybe kind of bougie private type of school. How do you think maybe being in so many different environments has been somewhat of a superpower, so to speak, as you've gotten into business and doing digital media storytelling? Because for me, like, it was kind of like the same way for me. Like I grew up in the suburbs of Seattle, Washington, a lot of Asian, a lot of white, kind of bougie, kind of the way you described what your schooling was like. It was kind of like what mine was like too. But then I have the Ghanaian background as well. And I feel like that has served me. I never fit in a box, but I feel like because of who I am, like what you were saying about being your authentic self, like you almost feel like a confidence because of that. And it took me a while to figure that out for me personally, but just for you, do you think you've always kind of looked at that as a power just because you've dabbled in so many different environments and taken that into your work? What do you say?
Yeah, 100%, man. You know, superpower, whatever you want to call it. You just got to embrace your environment, your upbringing to your advantage. And so for me, I've always had the ability to, you know, people talk a lot about code switching, right? Being a different person in different environments, being a little bit of a chameleon. You know, I never really looked at it like code switching. I actually more so always wanted to like stand out, kind of going back to like going by Amechi instead of Brendan. In any environment that I was, I wanted to be like, this is who I am. Like, let me be very firm in like who I am, where I come from, how I operate, and be comfortable in that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna, of course, need to adjust to the environments that you're in slightly depending on where you're at. But I feel like for the most part, I'm the same person, you know, whether I was at Santa Clara University, whether I was at, you know, Ernst & Young, whether I was, you know, doing music videos with rap artists, whether I was working with like I've always felt like I'm the same person. So I think in terms of your question, the superpower is just networking, man. Being able to look like when I live like an hour plus away from where I went to high school. So if we have like basketball practices before school at like 6 a.m. or whatever the case is, I always sometimes need to stay over some of my friends' house who stayed out that way, right? So you got to be able to you know, talk to different people, ask them, is it good if I do this? Like you got to just get in there and just like make your life the life that it needs to be. And I feel like those always added to me being able to be comfortable talking with all different types of people and just networking, you know, no matter what you know, what background somebody has. I never felt like, I don't want to say I never felt nervous, but I always had the ability to network and whatnot. So I think networking was the main thing that it helped me with being in all those different environments.
How has the way you've looked at your Nigerian heritage evolved as you've come into yourself more as a young adult?
I would say it's evolved a lot because at the beginning, very much so, like born in Nigeria group, was there up until like right before starting kindergarten. Then being really immersed into American culture, but being raised in Nigerian household.
Yeah.
So trying to make sense of the two, because like my parents are experiencing America for the first time. I'm experiencing it for the first time. And so there's certain things they don't know. And I think as I was growing up in elementary school and middle school, I just wanted to blend in. I didn't want people to know I was different, even though I was clearly different. And so that was something that didn't shift until when I was in college and started to embrace being Nigerian a little bit more. I think from joining things like the African Student Association, and then just a lot, the nature of a lot of the engineers that I got connected with were also African, a lot of them Nigerians, just because that running stereotype.
Yeah.
And then I think now over the last few years is really I embracing my culture, but in my own sense, because and my siblings and I, we joke about this, and I think everything that you talk about with 1.5 and second generation Americans will probably understand. Black Americans will understand this as well. Is that we very much exist between the two cultures, So we are too Nigerian for Americans and we're too American for Nigerians.
Yeah.
So we don't quite fit in either way. And I think it's more so just accepting that I am different and embracing those differences. And I think a lot of times I just see things in a different way. I don't, and it's hard to put in words unless it's like a specific situation, but I don't see things the way everyone else sees things for the most part.
You said that going into college is when maybe you started maybe embracing that Nigerian side more, at least outwardly. And for some reason, I feel like a lot of the conversations I've had with people that it was the same case with me. A lot of the people I've had on the show to talk about kind of that experience is kind of growing up. You don't want that side of you, that African side of you to show, but then you get to a point, whether 18, 19, whatever, when you get to college where that maybe starts to come out more, or you make the intention to embrace that more. Why do you think that time of our lives is so pivotal for people maybe wanting to tap into that more? Because I find that so fascinating, right? Like, my gut is that maybe as kids you just maybe want to blend in, and then as adults you start to, or when you become more of an adult, you realize you want to step into your uniqueness more. I don't know, I'm curious as to your take on why that seems to be a point where a lot of second generation or 1.5 generation folks feel like that's the time to where it's okay to demonstrate that side of themselves more.
That's a really good question. My first thought is that in college is where you are exposed to the most diverse group of people that you will ever meet. And I think in elementary and high school, everyone's just trying to fit in and be the same. But in college is almost the opposite. Like you want to kind of be different in a sense and distinguish yourself. Like whether it's like even a lot of scholarships are on specific, whether you're going after a specific activity, specific demographic, like there's a lot of things that have to do at college that they're being different and being unique is more celebrated than it is when you're in high school or definitely middle school. Middle school is rough time
tough,
for
bro.
everyone. Yes.
Femi, I'm wondering how, if at all, your cultural roots, kind of knowing your Nigerian roots, your Ugandan roots, if that at all has played a role in how you attack your career, knowing how you grew up, knowing, I don't know, the sacrifices your parents made, or whatever, has that influenced you at all as you've become a working adult in sports media?
Oh, 100%. I mean, 100%. And like, I was lucky enough to like, where like my parents had like pretty good jobs. They had made stuff of themselves. Like my dad, like when I was in high school, was working at Microsoft. My mom was working at Boeing, and like they're all since retired now. Like they've had great careers and everything like that. They just get to play grandparent now, which is really cool to see them in that light. Because like I didn't get to see them when I was a little kid because I was a little kid. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know to see that, but like getting to see them, like kind of like look at my little nephews, and in that regard, it's really really fun. Whenever I'm able to get up to Seattle and everything. But like knowing the sacrifices that they made so that I could pursue what I wanted to pursue, because I mean, you're in it as well. Like media, especially your first jobs, ain't paying a whole lot of money. Like, you know, like you out there, like you're living check to check. Like it might be glamorous, but it's check to check. And you have to know that it's like, all right, like this is a sacrifice. I'm willing to take this salary because I think down the road, it's ultimately going to pay off. And luckily it has. Like I live comfortably now. I have a pretty good job. Like I make pretty decent money. And I feel like that sacrifice, like if without them doing what they did and like me seeing what the moves that they made, I don't think I would have been as inspired to be like, okay, like I need to grind and see this thing through, because I've worked with a lot of people that come up from local news as traditional broadcasters and everything like that have dipped out of the business, and I don't even blame them, because like it's not glamorous in terms of like, all right, you're moving all around the country, and it's like for who, for what, man? Like I don't see the fruits of the labor. You know what I mean? Like where's the money? When is it eventually going to come? Especially now, like the more they're trying to cut people back and all this stuff, like it's crazy in the local news era. So like I think that having the inspiration and knowing to be like, all right, like I'm going to make this work and I'm always going to be looking for ways to continue to keep climbing. It's from them to be like, okay, hey, like all of those years of sacrifice, it wasn't for nothing. It amounted to something, and look what I've turned into. So that's definitely something that runs through my mind. Like whenever I'm like considering like what jobs I want to take next or what I want to do with my career, and motivating to keep climbing and not be content, because I feel like I would be selling them short based on the bets that they made on me, like to kind of like, okay, like we feel like this is what you want to do. We're going to be incredibly supportive. Like, I talked about how like they wanted me to be a doctor and all that stuff, but I told them, I was like, hey, that's just not going to be it for me. And they were like, all right, well, whatever you do, you need to do it to the best of your ability. We will always support you, but like you need to have a plan. And I told them like, here's what I want to do. And it's not going to be great to start off, but I believe it's going to pay off because I'm going to be great at this thing because this is what I'm passionate about. And they've been supportive the entire way, even though it's come with a lot of missed holidays and missed events and all that stuff. They've always supported me, which has been like just an absolute blessing because it's incredibly difficult and the sacrifices are they don't go unnoticed on my end and especially on their end as well. So it's been really, really great. And that's something that's just definitely motivated me in my career.
In a lot of cases, nobody knew I was African until I told them, or unless they saw my last name. So that was never really an issue for me. The only issue I had, I would say, is like when you go, like you said, when you go to Ghana, like the moment that they hear that you have an American accent, it's like, oh, you know the phrases that you get called whenever you're not like born in Ghana. So like those are the things that you have to like. It's just gonna come with it. Like, I mean, you're gonna pronounce things differently because you don't have an accent. And I don't think that's them saying you're any less African. It's just like, hey, he was born in America or he was born outside of Ghana. So we're gonna kind of identify him as this. However, they still embrace you as one of their own. In a lot of cases, it's like your family members that like they still have that love for you because they know that like your parents were raised with them or whatever it may be. So at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, he's still one of us. He just didn't grow up the same as we did. I think another thing that kind of contributes to that is like it'll be like where you grow up regionally. Honestly, I think being in the region that you grew up in, like I can see, like in comparison to Texas, it'll definitely be a little bit, a little bit more
different. Yeah,
you know what I mean. So like, yeah, like I've heard of that. I've heard that perspective quite a bit. Growing up, there were like a couple of jokes here and there, but I mean, like everybody makes the jokes. That's just something that's like once you got to a certain age, the jokes like stopped, as well as like once they realized that you didn't care, it's just like, hey, that's just how it went. And then now it's like it's really interesting because now it's become like not necessarily a trend, but it's somehow become like really cool that you're African. So now it's not even an issue. It's just like, oh, he's African. But he did,
it's kind of
but
exotic.
yeah, you know what I mean. But like also, it's like because they don't necessarily hear it, then it's like it becomes one of those things where it's like, oh, I didn't know. Like, how would I have known? You know, unless you tell them, or unless you like wear certain things that like kind of show it. So you know, I mean, things change. It happened, and now it's like you look back and you're like, I kind of wish that when I was younger, I was a bit more open about it, because at the end of the day, it's like it's who you are, and you shouldn't be ashamed of who you are. You're gonna grow up in different places where people may not be familiar with it, and at the end of the day, like that's what makes you unique. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience for sure. I'd say over the last 5 or 6 years, like I've met more people like me than those that aren't like me. And even those that aren't like me have it's gotten to the point where they've become even like fascinated rather than like been the ones to like shame it or say certain things or make jokes. So
Yeah, you mentioning a moment ago about kind of the idea of being like ashamed about it a little bit, like
yeah,
as a kid, and I definitely resonate with that too. Like, right, because as you alluded to, like the environment I grew up in, and I think as a kid too, you just want to fit in, right?
yeah,
And whenever there were circumstances where we would wear our kente or our garb or what our dashikis, whatever it was, right? And I knew we would go to church, but then I knew right after we would go to the restaurant, and all the white people would see. Like I always felt like super like I felt really embarrassed about it just as a kid. I don't
Yeah.
now, but I think that kind of comes with it too. But I think what you mentioned too about how it's kind of become trendy to be African now. And I've talked about this with my friends too.
Yeah.
And we all kind of wonder like why that is. So I ask you, like, kind of why do you think that has changed to where like it was kind of people were getting clowned for it. Now it's like now if you have like the Nigeria flag in your bio on Instagram, it's like, like that's kind of
Yeah. I
like, why do you
mean,
think that is?
honestly, I think it's like people starting off as like very ignorant, not knowing a whole lot. And then as they got older, starting to learn about it. Um, Also, like with social media and like travel and people seeing like all these people going to Ghana during December and going to have fun, do all these things, that's something that's kind of shifted that. So as of late, you've seen a bunch of people going to Ghana. You've seen a bunch of people talking about Ghana, this, that, and the third. I think that is what's changed it. The exposure, people
Yeah.
realizing that it's not what people's initial perception of what Africa is.
Yeah.
Once people start to realize that, I think those things kind of shift it all, and I think that's what's happened.
How have you tried, Paul, if at all, to carry your Nigerian heritage with you in your day to day as either an engineer or within Credipol, Knowledge STEM? Like, how is that a part of your daily life or work life?
I would say it's a part of it, but not directly. So I think I tried to balance between the two because there was a time that I actually like changed my name on LinkedIn to be like
I
my
do remember that. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like my middle name is actually my birth name, but it has nothing to do with Paul. It was just like really confusing, and then I got paranoid about like what if someone tries to steal my identity because they know like all my different names. So like I took it off, and it was so right now, and it's also because the audience that I attract is not specifically Nigerian American or second gen immigrants or so. I definitely relate well to them. Anytime I'm doing speaking or in person, introducing myself, I tell people that I'm Nigerian American, but across my platforms, you won't. It's not something that's at the forefront, and maybe I honestly don't know. I couldn't tell you why I don't put it more at the forefront. I think more so because yes, I'm Nigerian, yes, I'm American. I'm a unique blend of both. I really just focus more on what I bring to the table as opposed to what either of those countries or demographics bring.
Even if your parents may not be happy with you not being a lawyer, doctor, engineer, I think that because there's so many, again, avenues to be successful in your own right. I think I've also seen this with a lot of like Nigerian American actors and actresses whose parents finally came around because they saw that their kids were able to be so successful. And I think that because like growing up, as Nigerian or Nigerian American, we know that we always have this like mantra, Naija no they carry last. And I think that plays a big role in how we approach basically anything that we do in our different fields. And so we're essentially going to be successful no matter what. And I think that is really what's important at the end of the day.